First Contact's Folly. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Confederation sparkled like a jewel box of impossible colors. Crystalline beings refracted light in prismatic displays. Energy forms pulsed with rhythmic frequencies, and atmospheric creatures swirled in carefully contained environmental bubbles. But today, all attention focused on the small, unassuming bipedal figure standing at the petitioner's podium. General Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force maintained perfect posture, her weathered face impassive as the Assembly's chief administrator, High Counselor Ixel, reviewed humanity's military capabilities. The holographic displays floating above the chamber showed human soldiers in combat exercises, their movements swift and precise. Fascinating. Ixel's translator rendered their harmonic resonances into standard galactic. But surely these are merely ceremonial formations. Where are your primary combat units? These are our primary combat units, High Counselor, Chen replied evenly. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated exclamations. Immerse, an entity, composed entirely of oscillating probability waves, actually destabilized briefly in apparent shock. Impossible, declared Supreme Commander Vexthor of the Arcturus Dominion, his chrome-plated exoskeleton gleaming as he rose from his delegation pod. You mean to tell us that your species still relies on organic soldiers? No combat AI? No autonomous battle platforms? Chen's lips curved in what might have been a smile. We find that human soldiers suit our needs perfectly well, Supreme Commander. This is unprecedented. Vexthor's translator struggled to convey his mixture of horror and amusement. Every spacefaring civilization understands that biological combat units are obsolete. The processing speed alone makes organic soldiers inferior. Our K-series battle platforms can calculate 17 million tactical scenarios per second. And yet, Chen noted quietly, your latest military exercises show a curious gap in adaptive response scenarios when faced with unexpected variables. The chamber grew still. Vexthor's external sensors flickered in what the other delegates recognized as embarrassment. How did you? Public records, Chen interrupted smoothly. Just like the fact that every major military force in the Confederation relies on quantum-based decision trees for tactical operations. Very efficient, very predictable. High Counselor Ixel's crystalline form shifted hues, indicating deep interest. You suggest this predictability is a weakness, General Chen. I suggest nothing, High Counselor. I merely observe that while a chess computer may calculate millions of moves per second, it can still be defeated by a player who makes deliberately suboptimal choices. A helix consciousness floating near the center of the chamber pulsed with skepticism. Your organic soldiers cannot match the precision of our battle platforms. Their aim cannot be as accurate. Their coordination cannot be as perfect. Chen's smile widened fractionally. Perfect accuracy is not always an advantage, especially when the enemy is counting on it. But perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than debate. The chamber erupted again, this time with a mixture of outrage and intrigue. High Counselor Ixel raised all four appendages for silence. What kind of demonstration do you propose, General? The Arcturus Dominion has a training facility in the Proxima system, I believe. Perhaps Supreme Commander Vexthor would be willing to pit a company of his finest K-series platforms against an equal number of human soldiers. In the spirit of military exchange, of course. Vexthor's exoskeleton vibrated with what might have been laughter. You would risk human lives in such an exercise. Our K-series platforms are lethal weapons, General. Oh, we'll use training protocols, of course. No live ammunition. First side to achieve mission objectives wins. Chen's dark eyes twinkled. Unless you believe your perfect machines might be at a disadvantage against mere biological units. The challenge hung in the air like a drawn blade. Vexthor's pride warred visibly with his tactical processors. I accept, he declared finally. One standard planetary rotation for preparation. The Assembly can observe via quantum entanglement feeds. Agreed. Chen bowed slightly. Though I should warn you, Supreme Commander, My soldiers may not behave exactly as your tactical simulations predict. As the chamber buzzed with excitement and side betting began among the lesser delegates, High Counselor Ixel studied the human general thoughtfully. There was something in her manner that suggested she knew far more than she was saying. General Chen, Ixel transmitted on a private frequency, you seem remarkably confident for someone about to pit organic soldiers against the most advanced combat AI in the galaxy. Chen's response was transmitted with what the translator rendered as distinct amusement. High Counselor, has it occurred to any of you that there might be a reason humans never felt the need to develop combat AI? As she turned to leave the chamber, Chen's last words lingered in Ixel's crystalline consciousness. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the weapon with the fastest processor. It's the one you can't predict at all. The betting odds in the assembly hall shifted dramatically over the next few hours, but only a few noticed that the human delegates were eagerly taking every wager offered against their forces. Fewer still wondered why they seemed to be suppressing smiles as they did so. The galaxy was about to learn an expensive lesson about the dangers of underestimating primitive organic warriors, and this was only the beginning. The Silicon Siege. The Proxima training complex stretched across an artificial moon, its metallic surface gleaming under the red dwarf's light. In the facility's main control center, Supreme Commander Vexthor's sensors pulsed with anticipation as he watched his K-Series battle platforms deploy in perfect formation. Observe, High Counselor, he transmitted to the assembled Galactic Confederation observers. Each unit moves with mathematical precision. Their neural networks have processed every known combat doctrine in galactic history. Through quantum-linked feeds, delegates from 1,000 worlds watched as 500 chrome-plated warriors moved like liquid metal across the training ground. Their movements were a dance of perfection, each step calculated to micrometers of accuracy. Lieutenant Maria Santos watched the display from her command post at the opposite end of the complex, absently chewing a protein bar. Around her, 50 human soldiers performed what appeared to be a chaotic series of preparations. Some were applying camouflage paint in patterns that seemed random. Others were modifying their training gear in ways that made the observing aliens deeply uncomfortable. Are your troops not going to assume proper combat formations? The question came from a concerned Helix consciousness observer. Santos swallowed her protein bar and grinned. Oh, we have formations. They're just not the ones your tactical computers are expecting. She keyed her comm unit. All teams, check in. Remember, folks, we're here to teach our mechanical friends the meaning of chaos theory. The responses came back in what the alien observers considered a distressingly casual manner. Alpha Team, ready to party. Beta Team, chaos loaded in charge. Gamma Team, has anyone seen Jenkins' Lucky Rubber Chicken? Found it. Sir, we're good to go. The exercise parameters were simple. Capture and hold 3 objective points across the complex. Standard training protocols meant weapons were set to register hits without causing actual damage. The first side to hold all 3 points for 5 minutes would win. As the countdown began, Vexthor's confidence remained absolute. His K-Series platforms had run 17 million simulations of this scenario. Victory was a mathematical certainty. The starting tone sounded. What happened next would be classified as tactically incomprehensible by 9 separate species military analysts. The human forces didn't advance in formation. They didn't seem to advance at all. Instead, they appeared to scatter randomly, like mercury dropped on a hot plate. The K-Series platform's tactical processors struggled to identify any known doctrine or pattern in their movements. What are they doing? Vexthor demanded, his exoskeleton vibrating with confusion. The answer came 3 minutes later when objective point alpha sensors registered as captured by a human team that had somehow bypassed every predicted approach vector. How did they? Vexthor's question was cut short as his tactical display erupted with chaos. Human soldiers seemed to materialize from impossible positions. They moved in patterns that defied tactical logic, attacking from angles that no combat AI would ever consider viable. A squad of K-series platforms found themselves engaged by opponents who seemed to be intentionally using incorrect cover positions, which somehow made their return fire less effective. "Sir," a K-series commander transmitted, "human soldiers are executing maneuvers with only 23% efficiency rating, but achieving 89% effectiveness. Combat algorithms cannot compute optimal response." Santos' voice crackled over the general frequency. "Having trouble with your probability matrices? Here's a hint. Humans are really good at being bad at things in exactly the right way." Objective Point Beta fell next, captured by a team that had somehow turned the K-series' perfect coordination against itself. The robot's attempts to establish crossfire had been disrupted by humans deliberately placing themselves in tactically unsound positions that forced the platforms to adjust their firing solutions, creating gaps in their coverage. In the observation chamber, the alien delegates watched in growing disbelief as the supposedly inferior organic soldiers systematically dismantled the most advanced combat AI in known space, not through superior technology or perfect execution, but through what appeared to be weaponized chaos. Their movements make no sense. Vexthor protested as another formation of K-series platforms reported tactical confusion. "They're intentionally using suboptimal strategies." "Exactly," came Santos' reply, and the aliens could hear the smile in her voice. "Your platforms are designed to counter perfect strategies. But humans, we specialize in being perfectly imperfect." The final objective fell in a manner that caused 3 different Helix consciousness observers to require recalibration. A human soldier, later identified as the infamous Jenkins, had actually used his lucky rubber chicken to distract a K-series sensor array while his team exploited the momentary confusion. As the exercise ended, Lieutenant Santos addressed the stunned observers. "You see, the problem with perfect tactical algorithms is they assume the enemy will try to do things the right way. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best way to win is to be so wrong that you're right." High Counselor Ixel's crystalline form shimmered with deep thought. "You intentionally trained your soldiers to be unpredictable." Santos laughed. "Train them. High Counselor, we had to train them to be predictable. Chaos is our natural state. Why do you think we never bothered developing combat AI? We could never get them to be properly improper." As the quantum feeds carried the results across the galaxy, betting payments weren't the only things being redistributed. Strategic assessments, military doctrines, and most importantly, assumptions about primitive organic warriors were being hastily revised. And in the human command post, Lieutenant Santos received a message from General Chen back on Earth. "Well done. Now show them what humans can really do when we're actually trying." The galaxy was about to learn that they hadn't even seen the beginning of human tactical creativity. The human factor, the aftermath of the Proxima demonstration, rippled through the Galactic Confederation like a quantum shockwave. Supreme Commander Vexthor faced the assembly with his exoskeleton set to maximum opacity, the Arcturan equivalent of a blush. Clearly, he stated, vocal synthesizers pitched higher than normal. The training exercise parameters were insufficient to demonstrate our platform's true capabilities. General Chen's response was immediate. "Would you prefer a more realistic scenario?" The assembly chamber grew silent. Even the atmospheric beings ceased their usual swirling. "What do you propose?" High Counselor Ixel asked, crystalline form refracting light in patterns of intense interest. "A full-scale combat exercise. 3 days. Your best combat platforms against my best troops. Real terrain, real weather conditions, real tactical challenges." Chen's eyes gleamed. "No safety protocols this time. Just training rounds that simulate actual combat conditions." Vexthor's tactical processors whirred audibly. "You would risk such an engagement after seeing our platform's capabilities." "Oh, Commander." Chen smiled. "You haven't seen our capabilities yet." Lieutenant Santos was under orders to keep things simple. The exercise was scheduled for the uninhabited moon of Kepler 186f, a harsh world of craggy mountains and unpredictable weather patterns. As the quantum feeds activated, viewers across the galaxy settled in for what they expected to be a definitive demonstration of mechanical superiority. They didn't expect to witness a revolution in warfare. The first sign that something was different came when the human dropships entered the atmosphere. Instead of deploying in standard landing patterns, they scattered like seeds in the wind, each choosing what appeared to be randomly terrible landing zones. Their descent calculations are completely wrong, Immerse, an entity observer, noted. They're landing in tactically compromised positions. Are they? High Counselor Ixel mused, watching as the humans disappeared into the landscape with disturbing effectiveness. The K-series platforms deployed with perfect precision, establishing textbook search patterns across the terrain. Their sensors swept the landscape in methodical grids, quantum processors calculating every possible hiding spot. They found nothing. For 6 hours, the machines searched while the humans seemed to vanish into the very rocks. The alien observers grew restless. Some suggested the humans had simply fled. Then the storm hit. Kepler 186f was notorious for its electromagnetic storms. The K-series platforms immediately adjusted their formations to compensate for the interference, their programming adapting to maintain optimal tactical positioning. That's when the humans struck. They came from everywhere and nowhere, using the storm's electromagnetic interference like a cloak. Where the machines struggled to compensate for reduced sensor efficiency, the humans thrived in the chaos. Impossible, Vexthor declared as his platforms began reporting losses. They're operating in conditions that reduce combat effectiveness by 72%. You assume, Chen's voice came through clearly despite the storm, that reduced efficiency means reduced effectiveness. Humans don't work that way. The observers watched in fascination as human soldiers moved through the storm like they were born to it. Where machines calculated, humans intuited. Where AI struggled to maintain formation in the wind, humans used the gusts to cover their movements. A Helix consciousness analyst finally identified what they were seeing. They're not fighting the conditions. They're fighting with them. The battle shifted as night fell, bringing freezing temperatures and near-zero visibility. The K-series platforms switched to infrared and continued their methodical search patterns. The humans switched to something else entirely. What are they doing? Vexthor demanded as his platforms reported bizarre contact patterns. They're singing. Through the quantum feeds, the observers could hear it. Human voices carried on the wind, singing something called 99 bottles of beer. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, confusing the platform's audio sensors. Sound propagation makes no tactical sense in these conditions, a Immerse entity noted. It's not about tactics, Chen explained, obvious amusement in her voice. It's about morale. My troops are having fun. Fun. The concept seemed to short-circuit several alien observation systems. In combat conditions, humans have a long history of finding enjoyment in adversity, Chen replied. It makes us unpredictable. The exercise ended after 3 days. The final tally left the alien observers questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human forces had suffered simulated casualties, yes, but they had inflicted losses on the K-series platforms at a ratio that defied every tactical prediction model in the Confederation's databases. More importantly, they had demonstrated something that no eye could replicate: the ability to thrive in chaos, to find opportunity in adversity, and to turn supposedly disadvantageous conditions into advantages. In the final analysis session, a junior Helix consciousness asked the question that was buzzing through every alien mind. But how do you program for such adaptability? General Chen's laugh echoed through the chamber. That's the point you're missing. We don't program it. We evolved it. Every human soldier carries within them billions of years of survival programming. Not in silicon, but in cells. We're the descendants of creatures who had to outthink, outfight, and outlast everything a death world could throw at them. She gestured to the battle replay, showing humans moving through the storm with primal grace. Your machines are programmed to be perfect, but perfection is fragile. Humanity. We're programmed by evolution to be perfectly adaptable. The implication sent shockwaves through the Confederation's military doctrine. Plans were already being drawn up to study human combat techniques, to perhaps find ways to incorporate organic unpredictability into machine learning. But as General Chen had tried to tell them from the start, you couldn't program chaos. You had to be born to it. And humans, they were chaos incarnate. Evolution's edge. The Galactic Confederation's Military Advisory Council was in chaos. Quantum processors smoking from overwork, tactical AIs crashing from logical paradoxes, and strategic planning matrices showing fatal errors. The cause? A simple research paper titled The Human Factor, Organic Adaptability in Modern Warfare, by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's leading xenomilitary analyst. This cannot be correct, declared first strategist Vec Null of the Silicon Collective, his holographic form flickering with distress. According to these findings, human combat effectiveness actually increases under adverse conditions. Up to a point, General Chen confirmed, standing calmly before the council. We call it rising to the challenge. The paper was projected in the chamber's holographic display, key points highlighted in pulsing light. Human soldiers demonstrate increased cognitive function and physical performance when faced with seemingly impossible odds. Stress responses trigger biochemical cascades that enhance combat capabilities. Tactical innovation rates surge by 300% when traditional strategies fail. The most disturbing section, from the machine's perspective, dealt with what humans called spite. Are we to understand, High Counselor Ixel inquired, that human warriors will sometimes continue fighting simply to prove their opponents wrong? Oh, that's just the beginning, Chen smiled. Let me show you something we've been keeping in reserve. The holographic display shifted to a new training exercise. This time, human forces faced off against an experimental combat AI that had been specifically designed to counter their unpredictable tactics. The machines had learned from their previous encounters, incorporating random elements and chaos theory into their combat protocols. The aliens watched eagerly, certain that this time, technology would prevail over biology. They were wrong. The humans didn't just adapt to the machine's new unpredictable patterns. They somehow used that very unpredictability against them. It was like watching a martial artist use an opponent's strength to throw them. Impossible, Vec Null declared. They're exploiting randomness itself. Not exactly, Dr. Rodriguez explained, joining Chen at the podium. We're pattern recognition machines, built by millions of years of evolution. The more chaos you introduce, the more patterns we can find, even if those patterns aren't actually there. You find patterns in true randomness, a helix consciousness pulsed with confusion. We find patterns everywhere, Rodriguez confirmed. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're not. But the ability to see patterns, real or imagined, and act on them faster than any computer can validate them. That's what kept our ancestors alive on Earth. The display showed human soldiers seemingly anticipating random machine movements, not because they could calculate them, but because they could intuit them. Where AI needed data to predict, humans were willing to act on hunches, instincts, and what they called gut feelings. Your combat platforms are learning machines, Chen added. Very impressive, but humans, we're learning machines that can teach ourselves how to learn better. The council watched footage of human soldiers developing new tactics in real time, sharing innovations across units with a speed that made machine learning look positively glacial. More disturbing still, they seemed to be enjoying the challenge. They're laughing, Vec Null noted with alarm. In combat situations, humor is one of our most effective adaptation mechanisms, Rodriguez explained. It reduces stress, promotes social bonding, and helps us process complex situations. You've never wondered why humans tend to joke in serious situations. The implications were staggering. The Confederation's military doctrine had always assumed that machine learning would eventually surpass organic adaptation, but they had failed to consider that evolution had created something far more sophisticated than they had imagined. Your combat machines can process millions of tactical scenarios per second, Chen continued. Very impressive. But humans, we can imagine scenarios that have never existed. We can innovate solutions to problems that haven't happened yet. We call it creativity. The display shifted to show human training exercises. Soldiers weren't just learning prescribed tactics. They were inventing new ones, combining old ideas in new ways, even deliberately making mistakes to see what would happen. Every human soldier is a tactical innovation engine, Rodriguez explained. We don't just follow protocols. We create new ones, and we do it for fun. The council chambers erupted in discussions as the implications became clear. The Confederation's military advantage had always been based on the assumption that machine precision would inevitably triumph over organic uncertainty. But humans had turned that uncertainty into a weapon more powerful than any quantum computer. Then what? High Counselor Ixel asked carefully. Would you suggest as the appropriate response to this revelation? General Chen's smile widened just a fraction. I suggest, High Counselor, that the Confederation consider a radical shift in military doctrine. Instead of trying to make machines more unpredictable, perhaps it's time to consider what they might learn from organic warriors. You mean? Vecnul's hologram flickered in shock. Joint training exercises, Chen confirmed. Let your combat platforms learn from human instructors, not to copy us. That would be impossible, but to understand that sometimes the most efficient solution isn't the most effective one. As the council debated this unprecedented proposal, Dr. Rodriguez added a final note to her paper. In the end, the greatest strength of human warriors isn't their unpredictability, their adaptability, or even their creativity. It's their ability to teach others, even machines, how to transcend their own limitations. The galaxy was about to enter a new era of warfare, one where the line between organic and machine would blur in ways no tactical computer could have predicted. And humanity, as always, was ready to lead the charge into glorious chaos, the ultimate algorithm. One standard galactic year after the revolutionary joint training proposal, the Confederation's Grand Assembly Hall hosted an unprecedented gathering. Combat platforms stood alongside human soldiers, their usually pristine chrome surfaces now bearing what appeared to be intentional battle scarring, a concept that would have been unthinkable months ago. Supreme Commander Vexthor, his exoskeleton now modified with surprisingly organic-looking joints, addressed the assembly alongside General Chen. The once rivals now shared something that the galaxy's finest tactical computers still struggle to quantify: mutual respect. Fellow delegates, Vexthor began, I present the preliminary results of the Human-Machine Tactical Integration Initiative. The holographic displays activated, showing training footage that made several Mersenne entities destabilize and shock. K-series platforms were moving with almost organic fluidity, while human soldiers wielded machine precision weapons with impossible accuracy. But it was the joint maneuvers that truly captured attention. What you're seeing, General Chen explained, isn't humans becoming more machine-like, or machines becoming more human. It's something entirely new. The footage showed hybrid squadrons responding to combat scenarios with a combination of mathematical precision and creative chaos, where pure machine units would calculate optimal solutions, and pure human units would improvise. These mixed teams did both simultaneously. We call it adaptive resonance, Dr. Rodriguez explained, joining them at the podium. The machines provide the tactical framework, while humans introduce controlled chaos. The result is something greater than either approach alone. A demonstration followed that would be studied in war colleges across the galaxy for centuries to come. A mixed human-machine squad faced off against an automated defense system that had been programmed with every known combat doctrine in the Confederation database. The defense system's quantum processors calculated 17 million possible attack vectors. The mixed squad used 17,000,001. Impossible, Vecnull declared, watching his supposedly unbeatable defense grid fall to tactics that somehow combined perfect mathematical precision with complete illogical creativity. The machines, they're acting irrationally. No, Chen corrected, they're acting human rationally. There's a difference. The footage showed a K-series platform providing covering fire in a mathematically perfect suppression pattern, while its human partner executed what appeared to be a combat role inspired by ancient Earth acrobatics. The combination shouldn't have worked. The numbers said it couldn't work, but reality seemed uninterested in mathematical impossibility. You've corrupted their pure logical processes, accused a particularly conservative Helix consciousness. We've expanded them, Rodriguez countered. Your machines were perfect within their parameters. We simply showed them how to step outside those parameters, and more importantly, when it's advantageous to do so. The display shifted to show training sessions where human instructors taught combat platforms the art of controlled imperfection. One particularly memorable scene showed a veteran sergeant explaining to a confused K-series unit why sometimes the worst possible move, executed at exactly the right moment, was actually the best tactical choice. But the calculation shows only a 2.7% success probability. The machine protested. Exactly, the sergeant grinned, which means the enemy's tactical computer will discount it entirely. They won't even bother defending against it. This is not optimal, the machine stated. Kid, the sergeant replied, actually padding the 3-ton war machine's armor. That's what makes it perfect. High Counselor Ixel's crystalline form shimmered with deep thought patterns. You've created something unprecedented, a synthesis of organic intuition and machine precision. More than that, Chen said, we've created understanding. The machines are learning that there's more to combat than mathematics, and humans are learning that sometimes the optimal solution is actually optimal. It's not about one approach being superior. It's about knowing when to use each. The assembly watched in fascinated horror as the demonstration concluded with what could only be described as a machine making a joke. A K-series platform, after executing a particularly unlikely maneuver, had turned to its human partner and said, "My tactical probability calculator suggests that was entirely too awesome to be allowed." The real breakthrough, Rodriguez explained, wasn't teaching machines to be unpredictable or humans to be precise. It was teaching both sides that strength comes from diversity of approach. A perfect sword and an imperfect shield, working in harmony. As the assembly debated the implications, General Chen shared a private moment with her former rival, Vexthor. "Did you ever imagine," she asked, "that your perfect machines would learn to appreciate imperfection?" "Did you ever imagine," he countered, his vocal synthesizer carrying an unmistakable note of humor, "that your chaos-loving humans would learn to appreciate mathematical precision? Maybe that's the ultimate algorithm," Chen mused. "Not perfect calculation or perfect chaos, but perfect balance between the two." The galaxy was entering a new age. The division between organic and machine warfare was dissolving, replaced by something that combined the best of both. Combat platforms were learning to trust intuition, while human soldiers were learning to appreciate precision. And somewhere in the training grounds of Proxima, a K-series platform was teaching a human recruit the mathematical perfect way to throw a rubber chicken, while the human explained why mathematical perfection wasn't always the point. The future of warfare had arrived, and it was gloriously, perfectly imperfect.